This is our panel discussion, and we have titles that end up probably being about the same in terms of the direction that they send our panelists in. But this one is called "If I Started My Business Today, What Might I Do Again, or What Might I Do Differently?" The panelists are folks I introduced you to earlier in the evening, and so I won't go further with that. The format is going to be pretty informal, and I'll try to keep it moving because we have a little under 45, 50 minutes for this portion. Then we'll have a break, and then there'll be an opportunity for, it's hard to pick a favorite part of the evening, but the last part may be my favorite. We call it speed networking. We have 12 speakers altogether, 6 panelists here and 6 in rooms A, B across the way. There'll be an opportunity for individual and small group conversations with them. We call it speed networking, and that'll finish up the evening and take us up to a little before 9 o'clock. This panel, I'll ask you to each maybe just take a turn and address the question, what if I started my business today? I know a couple of our panelists are starting their business today, so it'd probably be a pretty easy question to answer, Janira in particular, I don't know, maybe others. And then we'll have a little bit of conversation among ourselves about that, and then quickly open it up to your questions. And let them interact. One of the rules is not a rule that don't feel like you have, like panelists don't feel like you have to answer every question. If you have something to add to an answer, you're more than welcome, but there's no obligation. So maybe we can start with Laura at this end and maybe just head toward James. What's a bullet point or an observation or two if you were asked, which I'm asking you, what if I started my business today?
Oh gosh, so many things. I would do so many little things differently, but if I had to give maybe like one big takeaway or overarching thing, it would just be confidence. It would be just kind of like operating and making decisions and carrying myself with much more confidence than I did in the beginning. I mean, we've only been open for a little over a year and a half, but you know, starting a business at 23, 24, you're just, you know, everyone's trying to bulldoze you, and I'm just trying to kind of keep my head above water. But now that we've, you know, established ourselves and we've had a good amount of success, and that people are walking through the doors and having great experiences and taking to the product kindly, like it's just, you know, it's easier and so much more fun to carry yourself with, you know, just a little bit more confidence in what you're doing, and so I think that I would start there as opposed to be there now.
Great, thank you. Janira?
Yeah, if I could give one takeaway, it would be to fall in love with the problem, not the solution. The solution has pivoted many times since I've started, and it's a series of failures and then learning from those failures and moving forward as quickly as possible, and not being afraid to hit a brick wall and completely fall flat on your face, because that's where you learn and that's where you grow and that's where you move on.
Both of you already started a bunch of questions on my part. I'm going to try to hold back. I'm sure our audience has them too. Chad?
Yeah, so for me going into tonight, I thought I was going to address the other question, but luckily for me, I started my first business right around 21. So I was 24, a couple years out of college. And for me, the biggest takeaway was authenticity. So, you know, starting a company at 24, pretty fresh out of college, you almost, like I felt in a way like I almost had to fake it till I made it. And so we'd go into all these meetings kind of almost pretending that we were a bigger company than we actually were, because there's just 2 of us working out of our bedrooms, renting places down at the beach. And so we had to tell these stories that that would get us the clients, but ultimately, you know, it shifted at one point when we finally landed this meeting with this large publicly traded company that has hundreds of offices nationwide. And somehow we got the CEO on the phone like at 7:30 p.m. at night one night. And we decided, hey, we're just going to be ourselves for this meeting. And we shot the guy straight with our business and told him, you know, what we're trying to do and how we were struggling. And he gave us a chance, an opportunity. And it was a very large account for us at the time. And it gave us the opportunity to make our first hire for our first employee. So, you know, being authentic, if I could look back, the first year we were probably not falling into that category. So kind of wasted a year in a way by going down that other path. But that's what I would say.
Thanks. Omar?
Yeah, I actually believe or agree with a lot of what Chad just said. And for me, I think at this point, looking back, I realize how much the story being told has allowed us to achieve so much. When it's 2008 and everybody else is closing down restaurants and we're looking at opening new restaurants, by telling the biggest landlord in California that we are the best people at running a food amenity for them, we, just like Chad just explained, didn't think that we were. That's what we said to them, which allowed them to, or made them take a big chance on us, which since then has grown into several locations and a really strong partnership that is continuing to evolve. And that's the story that I feel is happening over and over with all my projects. You know, I got involved in the mezcal industry and same thing. It's all about the story of the vision of what I wanted out of the business, and that's what people kind of bought into or joined into, I will say, better than bought, in the sense that they're, you know, attracted a lot of passionate people. And so if anything, I would go back in time and look back to the businesses I started when I was younger, is I did not attract people that were passionate. It was just employees. It was just investors that just cared about a return. There was no passion involved. And so if you can bring that story to be about something that you really care about, and at the same time, people can feel that passion from you, they will come to you, investors will flow into you, employees, the best of employees will come to you. And I think, you know, the mistake of trying to do it all on your own, that was also like a big learning curve there, where now, I mean, I'm all about partnering with the right people. And again, the story, the passion, those things come together.
Thank you. Jordan.
Yeah, if I could just touch on something Amar said, is don't be a hero. Like when I started my business, I was trying to be the CEO. I was trying to handle all of the business transactions. I was trying to write all of the software, front end and back end. I was trying to write the patent, and I was trying to form business relationships. And I was spreading myself too thin. And it really wasn't until I brought on a partner and some software engineers that we really started to move forward faster. You know, those relationships are really key when you're starting a business. Is you need to have a partner that you can go to war with, where you can yell at each other like crazy over one little thing, and then the next day wake up and be like, okay, so how are we going to go after this? So I think the number one thing would be, don't spread yourself too thin. Don't try to do everything.
And James.
There we go. You know, I would probably, looking back, I would find a real meaningful cause that would make sense in an authentic way to the business and really dive into that. I think it really sets the tone for culture in an organization. And I think if you've got great culture, you know, the sky's the limit. So I would really focus on a meaningful cause out of the gate that would associate, you know, well with not only the consumer but also your employees.
It seems that there's a lot of emphasis on the advice, get out of the building, get in touch with your market, your customers. I heard that implicit in what you all are saying, but I wonder what specific things you've done to make sure that you're not convincing yourself that you've got a great product or service and getting some feedback from your potential customers. Janera, you're smiling.
I've been working on that this week. Just getting out there and talking to people, and it created one major pivot for me where I realized that I was approaching the user and not necessarily the customer. And so my marketing strategy needed to change drastically to the people that were going to be paying for my service rather than the people that were going to be using it. And the only way that I could see that was to get out and start asking questions, and not from my echo chamber. My echo chamber will always tell me what I want to hear and tell me how great it is and wonderful. I need to go talk to real people. And Dr. Priya, I don't know if she's here, she's been a driving force in that here at USD, making sure we're doing that.
That's a nice reference. Thank you. Echo chamber is a great metaphor, isn't it, for that piece of it? Any other quick responses to relationship with market? Yeah, James?
Yeah, I just think we live in such a different world than we did, even 10 years ago when there weren't smartphones in everybody's pocket. And, depending on what it is, right? Like if it's a service, that's a little bit different. But if it's a product, you can really find out who your customer is, and get a good sense of what demographics they fit into, with some creative marketing on, whether it be paid social media platforms or digital advertising. So it really doesn't take much to kind of get a business up off the ground and like set up a Shopify store and kind of load up some product and then figure out a way to see if it resonates with a consumer. But I think you can really get in touch with a consumer relatively quickly and kind of just look at the data. You obviously have to have some money to do that, but as long as you do, and you can kind of get some real demographics relatively quickly and then hone in from there.
Just one or two more questions, and then I hope you all have questions. We're going to kind of open it up for a Q&A with you all and our panelists. But there's also, besides that notion of getting out of the building and get in touch with your market, another piece of it is funding and cash management. And I'm wondering about your cash situation. Are you able to self-fund? And if you're not, what drives you to outside funding? One big spend that you have to make, or the timing of your spending? And if it's outside funding, where do you go and what's that process like? So self-funding or outside funding, and if it's outside, what has that process been like for you? Yeah, Chad.
So for our business, my partner and I self-funded it at the time, and it just probably because of our own ignorance of going out and raising capital. But I think for the first year or so, we racked up probably close to $40,000+ each in credit card debt, and then used all the cash we had made from odd jobs through high school and college to pay our rent and those other miscellaneous costs. And so it was really and then we've continued that based off of how we ran our business over the last 12 years is just self-funded. But the first few years were definitely challenging. And I wish, looking back, we would have known how to raise some capital, because it was very stressful at times when you continue to rack up that debt. But it also drove us to succeed because we had so much on the line personally of our own money.
You can't get much more expensive than credit card debt.
I know, it's pretty bad.
Yeah.
But there was low interest rates at the time on those credit cards, so it wasn't like when it was 22%.
Amar?
I think the one lesson I've learned throughout the years is even during the recession, there's just a lot of people out there that have money that want to invest. Yeah. And it's actually a big problem that investors have to find good projects to invest in. So more than focusing on how to raise money, it's focusing on the core of the business. Does it make sense to an investor? And in thinking that way, you're structuring your business in a way that hopefully will lead the business to success. Because if your business is not a business that an investor will invest in, maybe you have something wrong with your business in the first place. And so going that route of actually trying to raise money is maybe some of the best way to ensure that the business has a long-term success, because an investor will come in and walk in the room and break down your business plan in a minute, especially if they're seasoned and have done other deals and so forth. And then finding the right investor where it's not just about the money. I think you were mentioning that earlier in your fireside chat. It's a big key, because they're involved, they're emotionally invested. They really want the best, not only for the company, but potentially for you as a human being. Because the last thing you want is just somebody that just doesn't care about, you wanting to take a vacation or any of those things, and just wants to know that you're working every day and etc. You want someone that understands, this is really about building something that hopefully will make a difference or create a new product and so forth. And so there's plenty of those choices out there. It's just about looking for them, putting the word out, constantly talking to people, and starting with family and friends, and then moving up to the next level after that.
It seems like, to your point, compatibility with that investor is really important at a very early stage, isn't it?
I agree.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, so I'll be more technical. So I think I see a lot of mistakes when young entrepreneurs are out there raising money and, they skip to, what they would call an A round. I mean, it goes friends and family, seed, A, and then, on from there. I think everybody should be, I see so many people come into my office or send me a deck who have what I call founderitis. That's a trap. You're going to have to give some of your company away to raise capital. I think, if you've got something really special in the beginning, you're going to part with, 20% depending on how much money you need, and it could be as high as 35%. So I think, just looking at things kind of meticulously and really identifying those friends and family that you can get to kind of support you and buy into, and then beyond that, going into seed rounds. I mean, you're really not going to get into institutional type investors until you get into your A or maybe even your B round. So really, my one, suggestion would be to exhaust the people that who want to support you and believe in you, and just make sure that it's not their life savings that they're giving you, because that can be the kiss of death. And not so much so that they're breathing down your neck, or it's more so just sometimes that extra burden of the stress of the responsibility of, knowing that somebody's got, too much money than they probably should have put into whatever it is that you're running. That pressure can kind of build, and, you don't need it. So.
And friends and family always scare me. I think about sitting across Thanksgiving table from your uncle who gave you a lot of money and maybe it didn't get the return that he wanted.
Yeah, if he's smart, though, he knows that there's probably a good chance he's not getting it back anyway. So.
We have about half the time left. I'm not sure if we have a mic for audience folks. Do we know? We don't. Okay, so if you ask a question, because we are recording, we archive everything we do here at USD. This meeting going back 7 years, our pitch competition, all that's available. I'll plug where you can find that. We have a website called USDEntrepreneurship.com. We have a YouTube playlist with all the archived video from these meetings. So that's to emphasize that we need mics, not just so you can hear us, but also because it's being recorded and archived. So with that, what questions do you have for our panelists? Yes, sir.
I'm kind of in a position right now where I could go get a job in industry and work, or I could possibly start something of my own. How did you guys decide to choose to start your own thing rather than almost take the easy way towards a guaranteed position somewhere in a company where you don't have?
Before they jump in, where are you? Are you graduating? Or
Senior, yeah.
You're a senior, okay.
Sooner the better. Just do it, because the longer you wait, the harder it will be for you to make the decision. And coming out of university, you've got nothing to lose now. You'll never have that again. That's how I felt about it. I said, if this doesn't work out, then I'll go get my MBA or something. So
I'll take the opposite end of that perspective. I'm sure you learned a lot here. You're going to learn a lot more. And if you can learn a little bit on somebody else's dime, I think that's a valuable kind of experience that you can gain some just whether it be whatever the product is, or if you know where your passion is and where you think you want to go, if you could find something within that space and learn a little while you're getting paid by somebody else, I think that's positive too.
Yeah, I would agree with James. So out of college, I got a job doing sales for DHL because I didn't really know exactly what I wanted to do, but I knew I wanted to start a company. And so like James said, learn on someone else's dime. And then that's where we saw the opportunity to create the company that we started. But it was as a result of getting a little of experience, outside of school.
And Jordan, I think you're in the other direction.
Yeah, well, so I can speak to this pretty well, I think, because I was in this situation 8 months ago when I graduated. My business was just getting off the ground, and I had to make the decision, do I go all the way in, or do I keep kind of doing it when I can and take the full-time job? And I took the full-time job, and I run it in the night, and I don't sleep, and it's tough, but it's good because, like James was saying, I'm learning a lot on someone else's dime, and I'm still pushing my company forward.
I think the question shouldn't be about if you're going to get a job or if you're going to start a business. The question is, do you have a business you already have in mind that is not something you feel like you should pass on? That should be the driving force that makes you say, I'm willing to give up, financial security and put all the stress on my shoulders. We don't want to romanticize the whole experience. It's hard. Like, there's ups and downs every day. Like, you're emotionally, it's a roller coaster, and
More downs than ups in the beginning.
and this is James saying that, right? So I'm just saying it's a real decision to make. It's not something you take lightly. Where when I graduated from University of San Diego, I was 21 and a half. I will say, not even 22 yet. And I really wanted to have my own business already. That was just always been part of me. I couldn't figure out what to do. So I got a job. And 3 years into it, realized that being in a corporate environment was definitely never for me. And I never looked back from that point on. But those 3 years were fundamental in figuring things out in my head and what do I want, etc. So don't rush. Like, do things the right way, step by step. Keep learning, grow. Meet people, talk to people, and then if an idea comes up that's something you can't pass, then I think that's kind of what happened to you, right?
Mm-hmm.
We have another question. Yeah.
Thank you guys for everything today. My question is about the step after ideation or a cause. Right now I have a cause that I'm interested in building a business around. What was the first kind of massive critical action that you guys took when you decided upon the business and your vision that you wanted to build around? That kind of set the ball in motion and gave you the momentum to continue to hopefully profitability.
So the question is, after you have your idea, what's the first big step in developing a venture from it? Is that fair?
Tying back to the subject, if I started my business,
Yeah.
that's kind of what I want.
First big development step.
Thank you.
Question.
It's just not one thing. That's the thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Can you point to like a one specific?
Well, what's your example? What's the cause?
My cause is mental health. I want to develop a next generation therapy for mental health.
Interesting.
Not necessarily profit focused, more on the cause that needs to be addressed.
Yeah, well, I mean, look, there's certainly a massive need. I mean, we're in, crisis mode when it comes to homeless issues, which are almost all driven from mental health issues and other things. So there's certainly a massive demand. So that you kind of check that box, right? And, beyond that, I think it's really about trying to figure out what you're going to do in a space that there's a lot of really heavy hitters and smart minds trying to figure out, and how you kind of cut through that and have an impact in there. And if there's an opportunity to solve one of the world's greatest problems, I mean, what more of motivation do you need than that? But I think the next big step for you would be to kind of hone in on, what does that look like? I mean, because there's a lot of people sitting around a lot of tables trying to figure out how to, how to really bridge that gap and get people to a better place. So I would say it certainly would have to start with the concept of how you're going to kind of make a splash there.
Engineer?
I have a similar business, a marketplace that's a service to people, and I would say test your assumptions. So right now you're thinking of a solution. I would say focus on the problem and then talk to people and find your entry into that market. So find who your potential clients would be or the users of your product and talk to them with open-ended questions. What are you currently doing in this situation? What are you paying for? What would you be willing to pay for? What type of services are you looking for? And let them tell you what their needs are, so that way you can become very you'll understand what their problem is and what they're looking for, and you'll also understand how to reach them, because opening that door to your users is going to be very important. And when you can find a model that you're going to be able to monetize, that they're telling you what they're looking for, you'll be able to then prototype and alpha test with a very small, minimally viable product that you can test.
The question reminds me a little bit of is there a general rule about being focused specifically on a small niche, like an entry niche, or to think about a product that would have a very broad, wide market and end up being a huge service or product in the future? Do you have a sense about, in relation to that question, is it better to kind of be super focused or maybe more broad in what your market might be?
I think in this situation, you know, because you're having a service for people, I think an MVP, minimally viable prototype, is extremely important. So find a few people that are willing to use it, find a few people that are willing to provide that service, and test it. Because I can promise you the first 9 or 10 times that you do it, it's not going to work, and you're going to learn something, and you're going to change it, and you're going to pivot and do something different. And so before you spend all the time, effort, and energy into building your business and developing the concept and creating the marketplace for it, figure out exactly what's going to work.
Great, thanks. Yes, ma'am.
Can you talk about how you built out your company's organization? Like, it sounds like some of you were co-founders, but like maybe on the first employee, kind of building up.
Okay, so I'll repeat for the record. So the question was, how did you build out your management team and your organization from starting?
Anytime I feel like I'm not doing something as well as someone else could do it, I look for someone who can do it better than me. And that's super simple, but anytime, not just of things that like I didn't want to do, but you know, tasks or parts of the business where I just like intrinsically knew that I was not the best person to be handling those. That's when I knew that it was going to be beneficial in the long run to bring someone on to help me with that.
Yeah, I think you need to ask yourself how well funded you are to start, because that's going to really dictate what level of talent you can get. And you know, you go through kind of stages as your company kind of matures and grows. In the beginning, more than likely, it's you know, multiple people who can wear different hats, and you know, probably kind of the JV squad, as I would sometimes say. Some of them go on to become varsity players. Some of them you have to replace and or at least bring people on to you know, sit above them in the org chart, just from an experience and expertise standpoint.
Let me flip the question for just a second. Have you had to hire people, bring people in, recognizing that their skill set is relevant for a period of time in your company's development? I can think of somebody who's writing a block of code for you. That's written and maybe it needs to get maintained, but that's all. You don't need that person as part of your team. Have you been in that situation, and how have you dealt with it, if that sounds familiar?
I mean, for us, it's always, I mean, culture's been so important, and especially when we did our rebrand, we really focused on, you know, our purpose, our why, and our core values. And so when we found the right people for a position, if that position evolved or it changed or somehow their skill set didn't match or align with that as we grew as a business, we would always do our best to find a way to reposition them in a different role in the organization, because finding good people is, for us, it was one of the biggest challenging things throughout the earlier years. And even till today, 12 years later, it's still a challenge. And so we've always tried to find a new place or new home for that person when you find the right person.
Especially here in San Diego. I mean, you would think, you know, it's the greatest weather spot in the country, and You know, we've had a hell of a time attracting top tier talent to San Diego, and you know, it's certainly not New York or San Francisco or even LA. So once you get those people, you got to really try to hold on to them if they're the right fit. That's for sure.
So you're both kind of saying best athlete, not necessarily someone specialist.
I'm always best athlete for
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah, Amar?
And it still goes back to your purpose, your mission, both on hiring and both on the other question, which is like, if you're hiring people for the right, that have the right vision, and the vision is aligned with your vision, and they're coming into the company because they care, it's going to be a completely different employee than someone that's just looking, here's my resume, how much am I getting paid at the end of the year? Those are very two different profiles. And so it all goes back to the original part, which is how do you define your mission? How do you define, sounds like the culture and the company in general? Then it's just easy to attract people. It really is.
Question? Yeah. Hannah?
James, you talked about you really like raising money, and it's kind of one of the parts that's maybe a pain point or one of the hardest parts. Obviously, it takes money to make money, and that's a huge piece to starting a business. So I have two questions. One, how do you do it? Why are you so good at it? But also, do you drastically change how you present what you're raising money for in different stages? So like the friends and family round and seed then A. So can you go through those initial pieces and if they are different or if they're not and why?
So let me repeat
Yep.
what I heard. No. It's that we don't have a mic for you. It's our problem. So one is, how do you raise money? And second, does that vary based on the stage of development and fundraising of your company? Okay.
I think the first question was a little bit different, but you know, the way so I enjoy it because, again, it's kind of that thrill of somebody like really placing a bet on you, especially in the early stages, because obviously they're going to need to like the product or the service or whatever it is that you're starting up. But at the end of the day, them really kind of making a bet on you. So that was always one of the things that kind of thrilled me, is that maybe it was an ego boost or whatever it was. The one thing that I found is that, you know, with some of the successes that I had, especially on the early days of restaurants, and even back to, like, I stuck with my core investors all the way along. So if you're lucky enough to have a successful, you know, outcome at any stage, those people become like gold. So, you know, in the early days, I did some real estate developments that, you know, we made pretty good money on. And when I started Sidebar, they were on my first call. And then Sidebar was successful, and some of the other people that kind of joined at that stage, they, you know, came on to the next place. And then, you know, when we started up Suja, you know, there was a lot of people that were originally in some of those restaurants or real estate deals. So you kind of have to parlay your success as you do different things. So that's kind of the way that I approached raising money. The second question was,
Is it different at different
oh yeah,
stages?
so yeah, I mean, absolutely. I mean, you're talking to who your audience is, right? If you're talking to the rich guy down the block who you're kind of passing the hat around to, it's more about kind of your energy and, you know, your passion and, you know, getting somebody excited about what it is that you're doing. If you're down the line and in a Series B and you're talking to, you know, a big private equity firm, they have a totally different set of kind of what they're looking for, what their outcome is, how they view decks, what the numbers have to look like, when their exit is going to be. So it really is tailored to the audience that you're talking to at that given time, and it definitely does change from round to round.
Anybody self-funding and want to just say a few words about that process and the issues that you face?
Yeah, I can speak to that. So we've so far been completely bootstrapping our company, and we're approaching a stage pretty rapidly where we're going to start looking for capital. But it's difficult. I mean, right now, our core team is all on for equity. Everybody's just working nights, and you move a lot slower. So I think raising capital early on is pretty important, and it's something that we didn't do, and it's something that we're going to do.
Yeah.
My real estate practice helped me fund all the other things. So that's kind of a unique situation, I will say, because it's almost having a job that basically gives you enough money to do all these other things that you're doing.
Sure.
Up to a point where I had enough set up to be able to use, I guess, my assets as collateral to raise money. But that's not something, as when you're starting up, that's
Not everyone has collateral.
But I'm just saying down the road, it becomes easier and easier and easier.
Yeah,
And that's when you become pickier and pickier about who gets involved with your projects.
good. Yes, sir?
It's great being able to meet with young entrepreneurs, and I'm sure that all of you envision yourselves building large, successful organizations. And when you do, I'm just curious, are they going to be organizations that are based on a shareholder focus or a stakeholder focused model, and why?
So the question was, do you envision a business in the future that's shareholder-oriented or stakeholder-oriented?
So I made a decision a year and a half ago to turn all my business ventures into social impact companies. So it's definitely stakeholder, focused. It's all about the impact and the mission, and it's from an investment standpoint to pretty much everything, every decision is made with the mindset that it has to be beneficial for every single part of the business, from employees to the consumers to the investors to the suppliers. Everything has to make sense. One part cannot be, kind of like something you settle on. And so that's my personal focus. And I believe that it's something that can make the businesses stronger and more have an edge compared to other businesses that are more shareholder focused, where you're really worried about that meeting that you have every few months with your shareholders and giving kind of a report on how well you're doing. That's my take on it.
Yeah,
Yes.
I would.
Oh.
Oh.
No, please, go ahead.
I would echo that. So stakeholders, for sure, for us, kind of our purpose and what we're kind of trying to do is disrupt a duopoly and the large corporations that exist there and how they treat their customers and their employees because of their shareholders in some ways. So for what we're trying to accomplish and do, we're all about our people and how it impacts the people we work with.
I realized I'm kind of looking in this direction. Am I missing anyone over here? Yeah, please.
Hi. I'd like to know if you ever change your vision after starting the business.
Do you ever, have you changed your vision after starting your business?
Every day.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, have you heard about design thinking, that concept?
Yeah.
Yeah, vision
Yeah.
and also mission. So maybe you understand that you can change something to reach better the goal.
Yeah,
Or maybe you understand that there are, some segments of the market that are, more profitable than the others.
For sure. I think Groupon is a great example of that. They started as something completely different and ended up being one of the biggest companies out there. It's the whole idea is that your first original idea, by the time your business is running, there should be a complete different world. And that's the beauty of it. And you have to be okay with that, and you have to accept everybody's opinions, and employees may come up with the best ideas. I'm opening a bar in Old Town. One of the bartenders that came in play said, I really would like to have a speakeasy in the back of this. So we're gonna have a speakeasy in the back of that. That was not my idea. I cannot take credit for that. But those are the things that happen all the time when you're in that process of building things and making things happen.
Yeah, I think it constantly iterates as you move down the line. I mean, Suj is a great example of that. When we launched, I think I think we were either $12 or $13 in Whole Foods for a bottle of juice, and that was great because that's what it costs, and people were paying that. But we knew that A, it wasn't truly scalable at those type of numbers, and B, we just felt like really healthy, good cold pressed juice shouldn't just be for rich people. And it really became our mission over time to democratize good, healthy, clean juice. And we now sell that same bottle of juice for $2.99 versus $12 when we started, and that was because of that shift in mission, and probably too much so. I don't know that our margins are really where they should be. We might have democratized a little too much, but yeah, it certainly shifted our focus for the company.
Yeah, Janira?
If I can speak to that, I mentioned earlier about falling in love with the problem and not the solution. You're going to pivot a lot of times, and the true definition of a pivot is to keep one foot firmly planted and move the other one. And so that one foot that stays planted is in your mission. Where's your heart? What is your gut telling you to do? And the other foot that moves is, okay, well, what's the feedback that I'm getting? Where am I being directed to go? And so that's where you move, but you do keep that one foot firmly planted in the problem.
Great.
Good. Yeah. Yes, please.
So if you have an idea and you want to expand, you want to grow it, actually, you had mentioned to not do the echo chamber, but you are also worried about intellectual property, or that some people might take the idea and sort of run with it. What is a good way to get a sounding board to maybe get professional insight while also protecting what you might consider to be somewhat of a competitive idea?
It's a fairly common question, right, about protecting intellectual property while you kind of test your idea, see if there's an audience for it, see if it can be built, and so forth. So is protecting IP something that
Yeah,
you
I mean,
thought
that's
about?
what NDAs are for. Just come up with an NDA. I mean, if you don't want to spend the money to have one done by your own lawyer, you could go on LegalZoom and kind of, massage. I mean, it's a bit tricky. I very rarely will sign them. So I'm telling you to do something that really potentially wouldn't work, unless it was something so unique that I felt like there was no way that I was going to wind up having thought about it or pitched it before, or whatever the case may be. So it starts with finding some people that you can trust, number one. But no matter how much you think you can trust somebody, I would still try to get an NDA. And if they're not willing to sign one, find somebody else who is.
I think it also depends, I guess, on the product, but ultimately there's only one of you. So there'll always be people trying to knock off what you're doing, especially if it's successful. But like I said, there's just one of you. So if you really believe in what you're doing and you're passionate about it and you have that why, then I think ultimately you can still persevere even if competition, comes out of it over time.
I've met people for coffee in mentoring relationships and had them sign an NDA, and there's nothing to be embarrassed about. If you're getting mentorship from a business person, they completely understand. And on the opposite side of that, you do run the risk. You have to get your idea out there, you have to get lots of input, you have to get lots of feedback, and the reason why everybody's not doing it is because it's hard work to start something. So unless that's your passion, most people aren't going to run with it. So when you're talking to a professional, I would say use the NDA and don't be embarrassed. It's a business discussion. But yeah, you're going to run the risk and you're going to get your idea out there.
Another really easy thing, just super quickly, is to just sit down with a business coach. So maybe find someone like you said, like a mentor or something. Because a lot of times I think maybe what you're looking for is answers or feedback or like other people's just like high level thoughts on what you're thinking. But a lot of times talking with someone like a business coach can kind of like pull those answers out of you and kind of help you like refine your focus before going and doing something like that, and sitting down with someone and giving them an NDA and getting to that point where you really want to like tell a real person about the idea.
I saw a question over here. Yeah.
What were reasonable expectations for funding?
didn't need a lot of money, and I had a lot of time. So can you expect to, I guess, cover your living expenses through startup funding, or should you have that on your own beforehand? Or how do you make that jump into, not working to starting a business, working full time?
So the question is, how do you find funding that allows you to maintain a family and at the same time build a business?
My kids are also teenagers and single mom, and I work full-time and I run my business. So if you're an entrepreneur, I would imagine that you probably don't get a lot of sleep and you have that grind, that hustle. Yeah, don't expect to get a lot of sleep. For me, that's my personal answer. It might be different for Sophie.
I think we were talking about different stages of funding. So your friends and family, if they were putting money in your business, would you feel comfortable taking some of that money as a salary to run your business? If your friends and family give you that money, I think if you answer that question and you say yes because you believe so much in that business, then an investor can look at it the same way, right? I invested in a couple of small businesses where, definitely salaries were getting paid out of the money that was invested in there, but also that meant that somebody was there 100% of the time focusing on that business, right? Instead of doing it part-time. So it all depends on the business model, it all depends on what you're doing and how much you believe in it, and what stage you're in. If you already have built the business up a little bit and then you're getting money, it's different than if you're completely a startup. So.
We have time for one more question, then we'll start the next phase of the evening. Yes, ma'am.
So has there ever been a moment where you were just completely, you had to ask yourself, do I save face for the integrity of what my mission is, my business, whatever, starting it up? Or do I say what I need to say, get it out, make sure that at the end of the day, what I put my heart and soul into, what I put my passion to, that's what is communicated, not how that might be interpreted.
So the question is speaking with integrity about your business and the stage of development.
Yeah, but also maintaining not only the integrity of your business, but of yourself within your business, because that's a whole other characterization.
Okay, maintaining your own integrity and the integrity of your business at the same time.
No
Easy?
one knows your business better than you do. So I think just always come from you should always feel able to come from a place of where you know what you're talking about. And you should always feel like you can speak with integrity. I don't think you should ever feel like you need to compromise it in front of anyone.
Yeah, that should be a non-negotiable. Because the minute you lose your integrity through any part of the process, it'll come back to haunt you for sure. Whether it's personally or financially, that's a pretty hard one to overcome.
Yeah, I think it also has to do with authenticity. So just be yourself and let that shine through. And you can't be everything to everyone. So sometimes it's just not a good fit for some people. So
You're gonna stop believing me because I tell you each part of the evening is my favorite. We're about to start my favorite part of the evening. We have about a 10-minute break. Then we'll all reconvene in the breakout rooms across the hallway over to my right. And this is our speed networking part of the evening, we call it. Each of these speakers and the other panelists will be available to you for small group or individual conversations until a few minutes before 9. So we'll reconvene across the way at 8, and then you'll have that time until the end of the evening. We'll see you there. And thank you, panel.